Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Shelby Jo Long. Shelby, I have a first question for you.
Yeah.
And actually, that just so I said Shelby, and I say Shelby when I refer to you, but do you go by Shelby or Shelby Jo? Should I get that in my head? I need to add the Jo.
I go by Shelby. So I'll
Okay.
answer the both, but that's
Okay.
I signed my whole name, so I just like having Joe there.
Okay. I don't feel as bad then because I kept thinking,
Yeah.
gosh, I keep leaving the Jo out of her name.
Gosh, you're like the third person like today that's asked me that. So.
Well, so Shelby and I met through a speakers community that we go to every Wednesday. And today happens to be Wednesday, so we saw each other this morning. Oh, I didn't mention your book. So Shelby is the author of I See Your Genius. And ooh, nice.
Yeah.
And well, so we'll get into the book, but this morning you briefly in your intro mentioned a situation that happened to you back, I think it was in high school, it sounded like, and something that you talk about in your book. And so I'd love for you to talk to us about that. So what I caught was that you were in an accident and you were in a coma for something like a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and then we didn't have time to get into it. So now I want to hear the story.
It's really one of the reasons I started writing the book. And I started writing the book. I didn't write it after the accident. I waited 27 years after the accident before I started writing it, but I dug into the story and got all that. So it's really interesting. I did that as I was starting some companies and starting to really get my consulting practice together. And I had a couple of companies by that point. And so I really talked about that journey, which I'll tell you about at the same time that I was in the journey of entrepreneurship. And there was this really interesting intersection that it was a lot of the same things that were happening in both journeys, in the journey of my recovery and then also the journey of entrepreneurship, where you really connect. When you connect with your internal genius and your foundational skills and knowledge, that's when you can make the biggest impact in the world. So that's the whole reason for the story, and we can talk more about that. But the story that I started with when I ended my junior year of high school, I grew up on a farm, central Idaho, town of 3,000 people. I grew up 10 miles outside of town. I was driving into town to go to class night, which is the awards night before graduation. I was a junior, so I was going to support my friends. And I was in a car accident. I was hit by a larger truck. My truck flew off the road. I was in a coma for 16 days altogether. So I spent the majority of that summer in Spokane, Washington at the intensive care and the rehab center, but I don't remember it. So that's a fortunate thing. But yeah, it's like I don't have about 2 months of my life. There's about 2 months I don't remember. But I was in a coma for 16 days and then rehab center for about 4 weeks after that. And really what it did, it was traumatic brain injury. I was very fortunate in a few spaces though, because I got in the wreck and had my seatbelt on, so wear your seatbelts. But my body was thrown over to the right so quickly that I bruised the right side of my brain, which meant that my left side was paralyzed, partially paralyzed. It did come back eventually, and then I had to relearn everything. And I had to relearn everything from how to swallow. I had to relearn how to walk. I had to relearn how to write again. And I was a junior in high school at the time. Also important to note, but not really that important, is that like I was a 4.0 student and I was college bound. I was in student leadership. I had just been elected senior class president. So I was in all the things and very active in school, and college was absolutely going to happen for me. But when I got out of my coma, I didn't realize my deficiencies, if you will, if that makes sense. So of course, I had to relearn how to do all those things. It all came back relatively quickly. I had to relearn how to walk again. I had to relearn my balance and a lot of physical, recreational, occupational types of therapy and speech therapies. But very fortunately, I was able to go back to school in the fall into my senior year, senior class president, calculus and speech and debate team and all the things that I did before. And I remember this very specifically. My late father, now he passed away 3 years ago, but we were sitting in a meeting with the principal and some of my teachers, and we were talking about how I was going to handle school because I had this major event happen, and they were talking about giving me a reduced schedule so I could acclimate and get back into school, and I didn't have to do all the things. And my dad literally said, like the good old farmer that he was, he's like, hell no, she's going to be challenged. She's not going to get to college unless she does all these things and continues on this path. She's going to college next year and she's going to recover. And it was that kind of confidence that he had in me that was a huge influence on me and how I operated. So like I did school, I did it at a much less ease than I had before, but I was able to graduate and I went to college the following year, and I didn't really feel like I was fully recovered until later, but I was able to function just fine in school.
Yeah.
Still graduated salutatorian and went to small college in Montana. I was on the Carroll College debate team and all of that. So yeah. So there's
Not only did you go to college, but you became a college professor as well.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. And a lot of that's due to college debate. I was a debater in high school. I was that nerdy kid that loved debate and loved speaking and loved talking about current issues and events and all that. And then I did it in college, and I really feel that the debate team and participating in speaking activities was really that I really feel like that was a significant part of my recovery. And I finally felt about 3 years after the wreck happened, I finally felt like all the synapses were firing again. And that was after I'd spent 2 years, I was on 2 years on the college debate team. I'd been all over the US debating. I had 2 years of college. So I felt that. I felt that after that. But I do really think that was a significant part of my recovery because it gets all the synapses firing again. And
Yeah.
I just basically did what I did before, and I did it at probably a lesser level, but
Yeah.
I just did it. So
Yeah. So your story is very close to my heart because when I don't know if I was a junior or a senior in high school, but one of my good friends was in a very similar accident. And so I feel like I was sitting there next to you as you were recovering because I was next to my friend Tina as she was recovering, but very similar situation. She was in a car accident. She was actually like T-boned as she was pulling out of a kind of a blind drive. And yeah, she ended up, I don't know if she was in a coma like you were, but she had a traumatic brain injury. She had to relearn all the things. And as a high school student at the time, I remember one of the things I remember was like how she didn't remember how to, once she was back to walking, eating, talking, those things, she didn't remember like hygiene, like she had to be trained again to take showers, wash her hair, things that like most juniors, seniors in high school, girls are doing all of those things very regularly. But it was like that was just not part of what I don't know, it was not part of her practice because she just wasn't thinking about those things anymore. Anyway, and she's fully recovered like you and married, has kids, all the things. But gosh, it was just, I remember all of that. And so when you're telling your story, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I was with you during that. So tell me about, let's transition from that to your book and like how you use that story, which is so powerful and unique. Not many people have experienced what you have experienced there, and how you've related that to your overall message in the book.
yeah, that I was inspired to write about it after it was something that because the brain injury happened and the coma happened, and it was like, and I was in such a small town and everybody knew it. And I was the kid with the brain injury, and oh, there's Pat and Judy Long's daughter. She had the car wreck. So I was that kid. Everybody knew it. And when I applied to go to college and I was meeting people, I didn't want to talk about it. So I hid it. And I didn't want that to be part of my story, if that makes sense. And I wanted to be the kid that was good enough to be on the debate team and good enough to travel all over the US and good enough to be in all these challenging classes. And that's the kid I wanted to be. I didn't want to be the kid that had a head injury. And so I never talked about it. And I told the story occasionally, But it wasn't until I started getting into entrepreneurship and getting into professional speaking and really getting into the power of story and brand. Like, I'm a brand strategist now, and your story is the center of your brand. And I was coaching other people to like tell their story and talk about their transitions. And I was like, gosh, maybe I should do the same thing. And so that's when I met some people in the publishing group, and they're like, you should tell your story. You should write it. And I know I'm speaking to some authors. The challenge of that is I was writing about this lived experience 27 years after I had experienced. So it was hard for me the challenge for me is that it was really hard for me to add emotion to it because I don't remember it, and
Yeah.
still don't remember it. I don't have emotions around it. I do, but I didn't feel it. You know what I mean? And so I always, I guess I think one of the gifts of the traumatic brain injury is that I didn't remember that I was deficient, that I just went back and did all the stuff I did before. And yeah, it was hard, but but whatever. I just did this. I went into my senior class president, and I'd always been in student government, so why wouldn't I do that? And I did high school debate. Why wouldn't I do that? So I think that kind of amnesia was a gift to that, but it was hard to recognize what my emotions were. And so in that process, I reconnected with my high school friends.
Mm.
And my high school friends, I have best friends from elementary school. So we're still friends today and what have you. But that's how I remember this very specifically. I wrote the draft. The chapter in my book is called The Empty Chair. But that's like the third iteration of the chapter where I tell the story because I wrote it in a very chronological order. I'm like, I left the house and I took a left and I was T-boned and I was in a coma. And so I wrote it in a very linear way. And then I gave it to my editor. My editor's like, Shelby, this is a major traumatic event that nobody else has experienced and is telling the story about. And I'm not getting any emotion from it. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is a huge thing. But I wasn't connecting with that. So that's when I went back and talked to my parents about it and talked to my
Mm.
friends about it and really started to develop the emotion around it. So I was telling it in third person, but since I didn't have any emotion around it, but the world around me was having emotion about it. And my two best friends from before we even started school, I interviewed both of them, and they both said the exact same thing, that there was an empty chair between them at this awards ceremony and they knew something was wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting emotions. So I have to write about that. And so that's a
Yeah.
chapter. And so it was an exploration for me. But then at the same time, so kind of getting emotions around that experience, I was also developing my brand story, which is I was a college professor for 15 years at that point, and I was feeling the itch to do something else, and I felt limited by academia, and I was stepping out to do consulting and being open and outward about business, and which is a leaving of one identity for another. And so it was very similar things that were similar feelings because I felt like there was this connection, but I used those foundational principles to build my business, which is you as a speaker, as an influencer, and how that builds audiences. So it was interesting how those two things came together.
Yeah.
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 I didn't
Well,
expect it, but it did
yeah.
when I got into the writing process.
Yeah, that's great. So I mentioned the title of your book is I See Your Genius, but remind me what the subtitle of it is.
Transform your idea into income.
Nice. So who did you write that book for?
I wrote it for professionals that want something else, to fulfill them, and that want to make a bigger impact beyond the industry, the job, the profession that they are in. Because that was my journey. Like I said, I'd been a college professor for 15 years at that point, been in academia. I love teaching. I love being in front of an audience. Give me 45 minutes, an hour, however much time. I love speaking. I love being in front of an audience. But I did feel limited, and I felt limited in the classroom. I was teaching business communication concepts to 18-year-olds that would remember it on a test and then not care about it. That's not an that was not everybody. Like I have some of my students are still my assistants, so that's great. But I just felt like I could make a bigger impact. And so it was a journey of discovering how I could do that. So that's
Did
really who it's for, is it's all about transition. It's not, it's for professionals that are ready for something else.
yeah. Did you completely leave that, what do you like, that role? Like you're no longer a professor and now you're running your businesses?
I am no longer a professor, but
Okay.
it took me a couple of years. So I was
Yeah.
half-time. COVID happened, and that's when COVID is when I launched my first digital program, because that was before the advent of AI. That used to be something that was, but now it's much more about brand and signature program and how you're going to make the biggest impact. It all comes in a package. But that was the first part of that. I was teaching full time at that time, but then the following year I started to teach half time because the businesses were just taking too much time. And then my last semester teaching was fall of 2023. So I'm no longer teaching.
Okay.
So
Okay.
teaching in a different place, just not in
But
school.
you're like basically teaching people to do what you did, which was replacing your income with, you have this idea and you want to go out and turn that into income, and you've proven that you can do it. Yeah.
It's really fun. And it's fun because yes, it's like the people the thought leaders and the like you're building a side hustle out of your jam, which is great. And yes, it's that, but it's also, there's a power in a brand, and there's a power in a personal brand. And whether you're a copywriter or an editor or you own a ice cream shop, you need to have a brand, and a brand that's recognizable and that make people want to come back, and that people refer business to you. That's such an important part of your idea, because you are your business. Now, the businesses that make a lot of money, like Apple is the brand. You don't really have the face of that brand, but in a solo entrepreneur and smaller business, there's such that personal connection is so important.
Yeah.
But it is really thought leaders, because there's a lot of great ideas out there, but I can find anything that I want online. But if you have a brand that resonates with me and speaks to me, I'm going to go to you to
Yeah.
teach me.
Yeah. So what are some of the ideas that people have come to you with that they've wanted to turn into some sort of income, start a business? I imagine that, are the people that you work with are like in in a job, in a corporate job, in a whatever. They have a job, but they have this idea and they're thinking about going out on their own. Is that usually the kind of the stage that people are in when they come to you?
Sometimes I've worked with some professionals that want to develop that extra stream of income, or that really want to step into consulting. And that's how I've refined, or at least focused, that whole program is how you become a consultant, so you can work less hours and have more time freedom. And so that's what the whole process is focused around. But I've worked with everybody from this gym owner owns a gym but wanted to create a passive stream of income. So we put his program online, and it's now in an app. So anything from that to, I've worked with a lot of authors, because authors know that you're not going to become a millionaire off your books unless you put millions of dollars into marketing it. So having some back-end business pieces that can monetize, whether it's speaking or a digital program, or you have a consulting, whatever that is, then I've worked with people to do that. So it's anywhere from thought leaders to local business owners. I worked with I have worked for the past couple of years with these optometrists that have an organizational management program, and we put it together in a program, and now they're working within businesses. So it just varies, but it's any idea. There's not necessarily criteria, but it's got to be a solution that people are going to pay for. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. So you mentioned multiple businesses. You are like becoming a serial entrepreneur, is that?
yeah, I have multiple businesses, but it's not all me. Like I have my own business, and I have things that I do, the consulting academy, but then I don't do marketing. I do baseline stuff for marketing, but I have a marketing partner. I'm a part of this professional speaking organization called She Talks, and my business partner in that, Julie Ducharme, and I have branding for women that want to build their personal brand around their business. So we have that space. I'm president of the Strategic Advisor Board. I have a few business partners in that space. We work with businesses to help them scale and reinvent their business so they can sell it. So I work in a few different spaces, but I just find that once you get your ideas out there, and I'm speaking to people that are authors, and I'm a speaker myself, but once you get your ideas out in the world, you start to attract people that kind
Yes.
of what you're doing. And that's a huge part about getting your idea into the zeitgeist, if you will, because then people can find you.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I had my experience of starting my business last year, and I went from like, how do you get a client? Like that was my first thing, like talking to people back in November. I was like, so like, how does this happen exactly? And then it was like, you just start having conversations and you start putting things out on whatever platform you use. For me, it was LinkedIn. And all of a sudden I got a client, and then I got another one, then I got another. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's just speaking it to the world is making it come to fruition. And yeah, and for me it was your book and your what you do, your consulting would have helped me dramatically a few months ago if I had discovered that when I was just starting down that path. I didn't have that. I didn't have a lot of resources at the time. It was just like, I don't know, I just had to figure this out. I hired a coach and that was great, but it sounds like what you offer would be really helpful or would have been really helpful for me at that time, but would be helpful
Yeah.
for people who were in my situation. Like I was in a job where I knew the time was coming to an end and also was like, but I don't know how to create a business. And that's like exactly like I would have been your exact target audience.
Yeah, it's hard because there's so many things. And you're in a business, so you keep learning new things. You're like, oh, I got to figure out how I'm going to take money and what am I going to charge for what I do?
Right.
And what if I can't do what they need? And so there's a lot of interesting outside of the brand. It's not just sticking a website up and telling what you do. It's not just writing a book. You write a book, great. How you gonna launch it? How you gonna let people know about it? People might not be reading books anymore. How are you gonna connect with those? So it's
Yeah.
fitting into the right space and branding, and it's a brand strategy, really. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I love because it's different for every type of business. It's different for
Right.
thought leaders, it's different for a manufacturing company, it's different for there's different solutions for every area.
Yeah. And you help people come up with their individualized solution to what they want to do. You also mentioned speaking, and I want to talk about that a little bit. How was She Talks? So you came close to my area, but I didn't get to see you because I didn't get to go down to Denver to see it. But so you were here for the She Talks event on Saturday, and you spoke at it, right?
It did. Yeah. I was on a panel and I was on a panel about business and finance. And I'm not your accountant. I'm not all that. But you can build a business around your personal brand and you can have multiple streams of income. That's what I talked about and how important that is to think of your brand as something that's bigger. And I'm in the professional speaking space too. As far as that background, like I've been teaching public speaking, argumentation, debate for over 20 years. I've traveled all over the world to do that. I'd never made a business out of it until now, but there's a big business behind speaking, which
Yeah.
you recognize because that's what your business is about, is getting the word out about that. So
Yes.
the She Talks event, She Talks is this great organization, and Julie Ducharme, who's the head of it, she and I are both former academics. I call myself an academic refugee. So where you start to feel a little bit limited in your space. And this organization encourages women to tell their story as a way to heal and build their brand and market and all that. So it seems like a pretty good place. I'm a regional director of that. So that's one of the other hats that I wear is that too. But I'm hosting my own event in Missoula, Montana in the fall for women in construction and women in the trades. So
Nice. Okay. All right. So we will, in the show notes, we're going to link to your book, but then it also sounds like you have a lot of other ways for people to find out more about what you're doing, get involved in what you're doing, and
yeah.
learn more about you. Tell me some of those. You can say some of those here, but we'll put them in the show notes as well for people. So She
Sure.
Talks would be one of those. What about your businesses?
It's Lead and Empower She Talks. My business site is shelbyjolong.com. So it leads to the speaker and the publishing space that I'm involved in. Also strategicadvisorboard.com. I'm listed on there. But you can find, if you connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook, it's a very similar thing. I have a podcast channel called the Genius Entrepreneur Podcast that I interview fellow genius entrepreneurs that have created income streams out of their genius. I'm excited to have you on. So talk about that. But yeah, I'm in a few places.
Yeah. All right. We'll list those out in the show notes. And yeah, I hope that you and I can get together sometime. I'd love to get involved in the She Talks events or something else. We get to see each other every Wednesday in a group called Speakers Speak, which I can also put in the show notes. It's a free community for people who want to kind of practice their speaking skills and get some experience with that. I signed up for it because I have to push myself because it is not a natural skill set for me like it is for you. But I love it. I look forward to it every Wednesday morning. And yeah, if anyone...
It's a great group, lots of great connections there. It's funny, in that group, I've reconnected with somebody that I knew 15 years ago here in Billings. I live in Billings, Montana, and he lives in Colorado now. And I met a woman from Boise, Idaho, Kara, and I grew up in the same town, which nobody grows up in Grangeville, Idaho. Very few people do. But then her best friend, just this weird connection. Her best friend's dad is the owner of the real estate company that my mom worked for 35 years. So just like all these really, you just don't know until you start joining groups. And I'm a professional speaker. I'm a paid speaker, but there's such a benefit in like knowing other people in that process and being in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So lots of great ways to get connected if you're wanting to get out and speak more, if you're wanting to network more, and also if you're wanting to explore going out on your own, creating your personal brand. Shelby's a great resource for that. So thank you, Shelby, for coming on and sharing your book and your story with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, both very powerful. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Of course. Of course. Happy to connect.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.